For the first time in my life, I couldn't pay my mortgage. I sat at my kitchen table in tears thinking I was about to lose my home. And then God asked me a question that broke a stronghold of 55 years that I didn't even know was there. What he walked me through next changed how I understand promotion, provision, and the prosperity gospel. This is a testimony I have to share. Welcome to episode 100 of Reflections of the Father's Heart podcast. Well, hello, everyone. Oh my goodness, this week's podcast looks very different than what I thought it was going to look like yesterday. And I'm so excited to share this with all of you. And I just really want to start by saying there was a point in time where I thought I was going to lose my home. And I have such a story. It's a God story for all of you, but I really want to reach into your heart and ask you not only to come into the story with me, but also to grab it for yourself. Testimonies are meant to be released so that you can grab them. Because what God is doing for one, God will do for another. And he may work differently in your life than mine, but he is working. And sometimes in the ways that are so profound. And so I'm so excited to share this with you because, I've been very vocal about my journey and just how tight it's been and the transition and the preparation and trusting God. And yet, to be honest, in spite of all of the things that I have shared, I've definitely had my moments of wonder. God, did you really say? God, am I really going to that place? God, am I crazy? Because sometimes in the natural, things look so unlike what God is speaking that we have no choice but to either trust or try to grab it all for ourselves and just take control and try to make something happen on our own strength. And I am kind of the queen at times of self-reliance, and it's something that God has been working with me on for a very long time. But I'm so grateful to be able to share this today because it is his story and not mine. Now, as you all know, I started a business many, many years ago. I went into private practice doing grief recovery and then life coaching. And it was a couple of years of just what I've talked about, things being tight, not knowing what was going to happen, feeling this deep call in my heart, and yet looking at the fruit of my labor going, it's not what I think it's supposed to look like. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. And I think back then, even though I had a very close relationship with God, I didn't really understand this whole idea of being prepared and how things get worse before they get better and looking for ways to trust and all of the preparation that it took. I'm such a visionary that I knew the vision. And because I wasn't seeing the vision, I was often walking in a lot of discouragement. And I would bring it to the Lord. And I'm sure he was looking at me going, oh, my darling, if you only knew where you were going. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened. The vision he had given me for what it would look like to have my own private practice where I had the beautiful opportunity to walk alongside multitudes of people on varied parts of their healing journey. And I saw miracle after miracle, and it was glorious. And I loved that season. And it turned into a season of overflow where I went from, I'm not even certain what tomorrow is going to look like, to I'm seeing 30 to 35 clients in a week's time. And at that point, so much was coming toward me that I wasn't even really on social media anymore. I used to do videos a long time ago. I wasn't doing that anymore. I just didn't have time. And everything was coming by way of referral because that's what God does. When he opens the floodgates, he opened the floodgates. And once I was in it, I did understand why I needed to be prepared for so long, because it really took a lot of understanding and inner strength and reliance on him to walk through those weeks. And then a few years ago, he started to speak to me again, and he started to talk to me about revitalizing the social media influence and to start to look to move into a greater vision, a place that he had promised me a long, long time ago. And he started to tell me that things were going to change in my business, and they did. But in the middle of all of that, I bought a home. Now, this home that I live in is a testimony to him. I bought this home in the middle of COVID. I bought it in the middle of people in bidding wars. And to be, again, totally honest and transparent, this home felt like a bit above my pay grade. It was the Lord that walked me in the door. I mean, I was not supposed to be in this home in the natural because I was outbid twice. But as God would have it, both of those buyers ended up backing out and the home was given to me. And so it was beautiful. And there were many times I woke up in this house going, how do I even live here? How is this my home? And to be honest, not too long after, I did go into this fear. I had this fear. It wasn't a rational fear, but it was a fear that this was going to be taken away, that the thing that God had given me would surely be taken away because I wasn't deserving of something this nice. I wouldn't be able to hold on to it. Or like how I had grown up, people in authority often changed on a dime. And so somewhere deep inside, I was holding this belief that God would surely change his mind. He would surely take this home from me. And it wasn't more than maybe a year and a half in that things started to get really tight. My business, just as the Lord had promised, started to shift. He had told me, you're not going to be seeing so many one-on-one clients. You're going to shift into these packages. You're going to be doing more trainings. You're going to be speaking more. There's a place that I'm leading you to. And I wanted to go. And I told him one morning a couple years ago, I'm in. I'm in. I'm in for the ride. I want the adventure with you, Lord. I don't want to stand in front of God and feel like I've buried something or buried my talents. I want to stand in front of him, and I do want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, to the best of my ability. And so I was in for the adventure, and then things just got tighter and harder and weirder. And as you all know, last year I was in court fighting to get a restraining order because I was being stalked by an ex, and it was not a place I ever thought I would be. And it was a very tumultuous season for me. It was very stressful. And yet the Lord really used it to help me to pare my life down and kind of narrow my focus, and also to start to be in this position to receive. I had always worked really, really hard for everything that I had. And I believe in giving and being generous, but I had never had to be on the receiving end of, I'm in a situation where I can't afford this. I'm in a situation where I don't know what to do. And being in that position, God really used it to help me to start to learn that I don't have to rely on myself. I mean, the truth is, when my practice was overflowing, who was that from? That was from him. That every person that came was somebody that God sent. So it wasn't like it was all me, but I was working very, very hard. And as the stress grew and as the tension grew, I got to a point where I couldn't do things the way that I had always done them. And also resources were tightening up more and more and more. My practice was slowing to a crawl, and the other doors weren't quite opening yet. And I had some personal resources and I was needing to use them. And then coming into this year, it was, I don't have those resources anymore. I'm at the end of my rope and things are not opening up the way that I thought that they would. And I didn't know what to do. And I was waking up, you ever have those mornings where you wake up anxious, you wake up stressed. I would wake up some mornings feeling panicked, and I would try to figure out what to do. And I'm kind of that person. I'll do whatever it takes. If the Lord was like, I want you to go work in an office right now, I would do it. I come from that world. In a second, I would have done that. But it wasn't where he was calling me. And I knew it. Like deep inside, I knew it. And it's been amazing what he's done during this time, because I went from waking up panicked to then starting to wake up in peace. Not that I was always in the greatest of moods or everything felt like rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. There were mornings that did feel like that. And there were other mornings where I was hurting and I was discouraged, but I wasn't shaking in fear anymore. And that was really, really new. And then I remember the month. It was in February, and it was the first month I couldn't pay the mortgage. And I was sitting there, and I remember sitting there in tears, you all, just sitting there in tears going, oh my goodness. First of all, I thought I would be remarried by now and I wouldn't be navigating this by myself. Secondly, the Lord knows what I need, and yet he hasn't provided. And yet I know he's calling me to a place. And I happened to be listening to a book, and I'm trying to remember the book. It was about the power of prayer. And one of the things that the author said is that when there's an elevation and God is taking someone into this new place, that often comes after they've exhausted all of their own resources. And that did encourage me. It did really feel like no matter what I did, it was like the faucet was closed and God was not going to open it. It wasn't like I wasn't doing things. I mean, I've maintained my position with the Institute. I am a trainer for the Institute, and there is income there. It wasn't enough to cover everything because it's a very part time position, though I'm extremely grateful for it and I absolutely love it. But it was all the other things that I had done that just, they would come and nothing would materialize. No matter what I did, no matter the prayers, and people were praying for me. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, somebody would just send me money. Or I have a dear, dear friend who the Lord would just lead her to be like, this is who you're giving to this month. And oh my gosh, I had never been in this position. And it was humbling, but it was beautiful. I have to tell you all, being on the other side of that kind of giving has shifted my heart in dramatic ways toward the idea of giving, which I'll talk about in a moment. But all during this season, as I've been in this place and I couldn't pay the mortgage. And so I reached out to the mortgage company to see what could be done and went into this kind of application process to do some kind of modification for forbearance where maybe they would defer a few months or something while I was, I don't even want to say trying to get back on my feet, though that was part of it. I definitely was kind of still healing from last year, but for whatever God was doing is what it felt like. You know, I've always been this person that there's been these deeper healing places that the Lord has led me into, but they've always gone concurrently with whatever else I'm doing. So even when my practice was really bustling, the other parts that the Lord wanted to heal, it was happening alongside my business. And this time that wasn't the case. Now, it wasn't like I wasn't investing and sowing into the areas that God was leading me to, but they weren't monetizing yet. It wasn't like there wasn't income coming. And so I like I said, I had moments where I didn't know what to do. What is happening? I'm in this process with the mortgage company, and things are getting really dragged out. And they kept saying they needed more documentation, and the months are dragging on. And I really was at a place of, Lord, I'll sell the house. I don't need to keep the house. I will totally sell it. And he was very clear with me. Sandi, I gave you that home. Why would you think I would take it from you? And that question, you all, hit a place inside. Why did I believe that? Why was that belief so deep, deep, deep inside where I believed that good things would be taken away, where I believed that somebody's goodness would turn on a dime and then it would become punitive? I knew what I had grown up in. I knew where that came from to a degree, but what I didn't understand is why was it still operating inside of me? Why was that still a belief that I had? Why was it still a stronghold? Because I was definitely believing that about God, and I was foisting that onto him. And even though I knew that, for some reason, I couldn't just break through it in prayer. I've done lots of work around strongholds. I've done a podcast on it. And I'm a huge believer. And in the name of Jesus, those lies need to break in his name, because those lies are from the enemy. And yet what I learned in this season is that sometimes there are things that only can be broken through via experience. Sometimes experientially, we have to come up against some of our greatest fears only to walk through them, to come out the other side, to truly realize how good God is. And that was the case for this one. This one was deep. This one felt like it was part of my DNA. And it just, no matter what happened and no matter what good information I would take in, it seemed like within a couple days I'd be back to, okay, but I may just lose my home. I think part of it was I wanted to be prepared for that. I didn't want to feel like I'm so attached to something materially that it's coming before God. The other thing that I learned in this season is that because I had become successful, I had started to put my hope in money, in monetary means more than I should have. And God really showed me that. And the other thing that had happened is during that stressful season when I was in court and things were horrible, and it was awful to be up there having my character assassinated for things that I hadn't done when I had really and truly tried to do great things for this particular person. So that was really painful and stressful. And so I had gotten away from what I normally do. I'm very budgeted, I'm very responsible, and I had gotten away from that and was just kind of getting through the day, right? In part in survival mode, and in other ways beginning to thrive. It was a very interesting season. So God had spoken to me, and God had said, Why would you think you would lose your home? You will not lose your home. I know what you need. And so I just kept walking. And I just kept praying, and messages started to come from me. And some of them came through in the podcasts about, when everything looks bleak and there's no natural reason to trust God, sometimes it's an opportunity to trust him more than ever. Sometimes it's a way to build our faith. And that was very true. There were some deeper places inside, aside from the agreement, the belief that I shared with you, that the Lord was rooting out inside and making room and making space. I started to learn that my bandwidth wasn't what it usually was. And so I had to kind of just pare down my activities, and it stopped me from saying yes to things that maybe God didn't call me into. It really helped me to focus on where can I be generous with whatever I have. And it really came from this whole idea of receiving. And so that was something that was starting to happen in this season. I was sharing with a friend this morning that, I had gotten into this place where I was going to church and I was tithing, and I would tithe well every month and, give to some things here. If there's a friend in need, I would give there, but I didn't give it a lot of thought. And what started to happen in this time is I started to go, instead of just blankly throwing a tithe somewhere, what if I was very intentional about asking God, what can I give and where? Sometimes it might be a little bit of money, but other times it might be just something that I have that somebody needs. And it was incredible to me, the things that he did. I have this, it's a really, really nice mattress that I had gotten a while ago, and it was in this room, but this room has become my office and my podcast room, and there's just no room for a bed in here. And so I had stored it in the garage, and it's, gently used, and I had a bed frame for it. And so I put it on Marketplace, like, well, let me try to get a little bit of money for it because things are tight, and I'm trying to navigate this season. And it was on there for like a week, and then I just felt the nudge, and the Lord said, there is somebody that needs this. And so I want you to offer it to somebody that needs it. So I changed the ad on Facebook Marketplace, and that's what I put in the ad. Is I put at the end, I'm giving this away, but it's only to the person that needs it. God has led me to offer this to whoever really needs it. And there were people that were not really looking at what I had read that were responding, and then a woman responded. And it was, I knew the moment she responded, she had been in the park playing with her grandchildren, and she had hurt her back and thrown her back out, and she was in a lot of pain, and she needed a firm mattress, and this one is really, really firm. And I knew in that moment it was her. And so I reached back out to her. We communicated. Her son and husband came and picked it up, and she wrote me this beautiful note. And I just cried when I got the note because it felt so amazing to be able to give in that way, so intentional, so the meeting of somebody's need. And it really has invited me into this season with the Lord of being much more intentional about giving, about really making sure that it is from him and that it is really meeting the needs that people have. And if I weren't in this season on the other side of people doing that for me, I would have never seen it the way that I'm seeing it now. And so time went on. And then I started to get nervous because the application was finally complete and it had been in for 30 days and I still hadn't heard anything. And then all of a sudden, within a week, things started to shift. Packages started to come in. And even though I hadn't heard anything, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And it came on the other side of helping a friend out with a family, kind of a family crisis that they were in, and just they had a funeral to plan, and just they do so much for so many people. And so I was so grateful to have the time to be able to serve them. And I woke up this morning and I went and I looked to see if I'd received any communication, and there was communication, but all it said is that your package is complete. I'm like, okay, so that's from like a month ago and you're just now sending me a notice. And then I went in and I looked at the payments, and sure enough, the loan had been modified. It's in a trial period. All that means is you just make the payments when they ask. And guess what, you all? The exact amount of money that has come in with those packages is exactly what I need to make the first payment at the end of this month. And I'm still processing. So like I'm processing with all of you right now because I'm so amazed at God. I'm so amazed at how perfect and intentional he really is. And I'm so grateful. But more importantly, I want this to reach people that need to grab this. Please grab this. I am telling you, things are not always as they seem. You know, sometimes when we're in that season and everything in the natural does not look right, and it seems like everything is falling apart and going to pieces, and the things that we've contended for are not there, and the blessings that we were supposed to receive haven't happened yet. Sometimes not only is that preparation, but what I have learned recently, it's promotion. Sometimes that is the very act of promotion. You know, I feel like we're all used to maybe the business world or the corporate world or just the world in general, where if you're working at a job and you do a good job, then you receive a promotion. So you go from doing a good job and maybe making a certain amount of money to then doing a bigger job and making more money. And that's how you get promoted. That's what you do. And that's what we're used to. That's what I'm used to. I come from the corporate world. The whole idea that I could be in a situation where everything feels like it's falling apart and feels backwards. And I honestly, you all had to fight at times to not feel like an imposter when I'm coming on here and giving words, or when I'm leading trainings and, you know, coaching people. I had to kind of pause and breathe. And I needed to really get the Lord's reframe on my season. Otherwise, I would have been in a corner, kind of huddled up, which there were days I wanted to be. But we're not used to this whole idea of what promotion looks like in the eyes of the Lord. Promotion often looks like things being so stripped down so that you can hold the weight of the blessing that's coming upon you, so that you can hold the season. You see, when we're in a job and we get a promotion, it might mean we have to do more work, or it might mean that we're overseeing a couple more people. But in heaven's economy, when we are being promoted, it comes with a great deal more weight, responsibility, and warfare. Promotion does not mean easier. Promotion means greater impact. Greater impact comes with more resistance. It comes with more warfare. It comes with more things that could potentially be betrayals. And it comes with more opportunities to get distracted or have assignments come in at a new level to take us off of our path and our plan. And so when we're being promoted in the eyes of God, we often need to be heavily prepared so that as we step into the promotion, we're so armed up and ready. We've so learned to trust God in a new way and on a new level so that our feet are not slipping under the weight of wrong assignments and distractions, so that we're trusting Him. I'm really called to sow into the kingdom. And so, yes, maybe wealth passing through to go to the places where the Lord delineates. And I want to pause for a moment because the last couple of days, the Lord has led me to watch a couple of documentaries on kind of the beginnings of the Daystar Network and the beginnings of the TBN network and kind of what happened in the families. And there's plenty of information on YouTube that you can go and watch. And I don't really need to spend time on it here, but it really seems to be people that did have a call from God, that started maybe in very humble beginnings and started with a vision and then grew something and got so hungry for the power and the money, the prosperity, that they became neglectful. Some of them became addicted. They became cover-ups of abuse. They started partnering with people that were not of God. And it turned into them misusing all of these funds and all kinds of different things that was never the original intent. And what I have noticed in a lot of those places is that what seemed to really infiltrate that particular genre was the prosperity gospel. And I heard somebody even the other day say, you know, God doesn't want us to be broke. God doesn't want us to be in strife. And I think there's danger in that teaching. And I really am so grateful that I had to come up against this fear of losing my home, of not being able to pay for things, of there not being enough, because it opened up my heart to see that there were still places inside where I was grabbing security from money where I shouldn't. My security comes from Jesus. It doesn't come anywhere else. And so if you're somebody who is called to sow into the kingdom, sometimes you do have to go through this kind of season because all of that stuff has to be rooted out. Because the truth of the matter is, yes, I live here. I live in the US, and I live a certain lifestyle that the Lord has called me to. I don't feel bad about it. But at the same time, that does not mean that there aren't people that live somewhere else that are not called to live a certain way. And I don't think that the prosperity gospel really fits in other places. I think it fits in places where there is a certain lifestyle or a lot of wealth, but it really doesn't work when people are going through hard seasons. And I don't think it's healthy to say to people, God doesn't want you to be broke. God doesn't want you to struggle. Well, no, I don't know if that's true. I just went through this struggle and God used it mightily. And I'm grateful for it. I'm so glad that he's given me these last few months. It has built something in me that couldn't have happened otherwise. And I'm still, I don't know if I'm all the way out of it. I don't know if there's more to pair off and if we're going to slowly come out of this season or if it's going to come all at once. At this point, I really don't care. I just know that what I saw in those documentaries is the last place I ever want to end up. I have prayed so diligently, God, don't ever, ever put me into a platform that will lead me astray. I don't ever want to represent your name in that way, ever, ever, ever. And if it took this to be able to pare things down, for you to be able to place me where I need to be placed, then I'm all for it. And if I need more paring down, let's go, because I don't want to end up like that. And I just want to speak on this podcast. And I want to say very clearly, the prosperity gospel is dangerous. Listen, if the Lord has called you to certain things and certain blessings because that is who he is, he's a good God. He's a beautiful father and he loves his children. Then he means it. He means what he said, and you should receive it with joy. Don't be afraid to receive what he's given you. At the same time, please don't ever frame a paring down and a strife season as you're being punished. You've done something wrong. It's clearly you because God just doesn't want you to be broke. That isn't true. It's so interesting because during this time, in addition to the kind of deeper dive I've been doing on Genesis, I read the book of Job. And I am so amazed at how deeply it spoke to me this time around. You can see where Job was he was a righteous man. He was very righteous, and he was giving sacrifices just in case one of his kids sinned. And the Lord was proud of him. But you can see in the middle, the theology of Job changes, where he realizes that no matter what he has done in his own strength, he still can't be righteous enough for the Lord, that he needs Jesus. Even though the word Jesus isn't used in there, he says, I need an intercessor. The other thing that's beautiful about the book of Job is there's all these foreshadows of Jesus, all of these foreshadows of, here Jesus living this righteous life and then everything being stripped away from him. But it was for our sins. But I also think that when you see the book of Job, it really helps you to see that not everything that happened is happening because you've done something wrong. And you have to watch some of the language in the book of Job, because in some translations, it really makes it look like God just sent Satan to attack Job, but that isn't the case. When you understand it in the original language, what you can see is that Satan had been roaming the earth and he had his eye on Job. And the Lord called Satan out to say, almost like, I know you've had your eye on him. The Bible is clear that it is the enemy that comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So when we're being pared down by the Lord, it is always for our good. It is never for destruction. It is never to harm us. It is to discipline us in a good way, in a healthy way. I never thought I would say those words, you all. I grew up where the word discipline to me meant like punishment in the most severe way. It meant abuse. And I had such a hard time with it when I became a Christian. And I'd read those scriptures about how the Lord, disciplines the ones he loves. And I was like, oh no, don't do that to me. That's scary. And now I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it. It's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. And in this season, what God has done in me and what he's shown me, I don't think it could have happened any other way. And I think the other thing too is going back to that stronghold of people just change, good things get taken away. I realized that I needed, through experience, to face my deepest fear and to realize that it's a lie. And the only way to do that was to face the reality of losing everything and realizing, one, God is enough. And two, that when God gives good things and when God makes promises, he never, ever goes back on his word. He is not like anyone that I ever grew up with. And I may have known that in my head, but now I can know it in my heart because of what he's walked me through. I love the end of Job because the Lord says to Job's friends, have Job pray for you because you have not spoken honestly about me as my servant Job has. And what I love about the end there, it says that Job's life was restored after he prayed for his friends. And I was really hit with, the scriptures that talk about how we're really to pray for those that persecute us or pray for those that maybe don't understand the season that we're in or don't support us in the way that we really need or maybe do speak falsely about us. It's so important that we pray for them because I think a lot of times it's just they don't understand. You could really see that Job's friends did not understand the situation. They were not being good friends. They were not coming alongside him. They were not walking with him. And so I just want to say to anyone out there, if there is a vision that the Lord has given you, if there's something that he's placed in your heart, you got to do it. I have a dear friend who I love her. And it's so interesting because she just has that wisdom. And sometimes she'll say things in one or two sentences. And I hadn't seen her in a while. And few weeks ago, I was spending some time with her and I was being honest, like, yeah, I've been through this season. I haven't known how I was going to, pay my mortgage. I said, but I feel this calling and it's deep in my heart. And I feel like I'm supposed to keep walking, even though it looks silly. And she just looked at me and she said, you got to do it, Sandi. You got to do it. One of the other interesting things that happened during this time is I went from waking up with like, I'm stressed. And I remember I said I would wake up and then I was more at peace. Well, what started to happen is I would wake up with a certain worship song in my head. Now, it's not uncommon for me. I think for years, a lot of times when I wake up, there might be a song that's playing in my head. But this time, whatever song was in my head would be very specific to what I was questioning. There's a song called Spiral, and the group's name is Hayden. And I had listened to it a little while back, and then I hadn't listened to it in a long time. And I was in the middle of leading a certification training a few months ago. And I woke up in the morning and it was, there's a difference between I'm focused on a song and I'm kind of playing it in my head versus the Holy Spirit is playing me a song and he's playing the exact words. And the Holy Spirit was playing the words of that song. And the words are just so powerful and it's so profound. And it's basically like, there's a reason. This is just a season. Job didn't know it, but there was a reason why hope was hard to find. Finish the story. It's for his glory. Paul sang in chains through all of the woes he knew. You got to see it through. There's a plan for you. And that was the words that were playing over and over in my head. And I remember just going, you'll even speak to me in music. And so again, I want to say, I know there are people out there that God has put something in your heart. There's a vision that he gave you. Maybe it was a vision from a long time ago. Maybe it's more recent, but there's something in your heart that has been stirring. And if you look in the natural, it looks impossible. It looks like there's no way that you could ever accomplish this. And please hear my words. He will make a way where there is no way. You think about Isaiah 43, when you get further into the passage of it, it talks about how he will make streams in the wasteland. Sometimes in the natural things look like a wasteland. Sometimes it looks like things have dried up. That's how I felt, like I was in a desert. What once had been flowing now felt very parched. And I couldn't understand how this was going to move forward. And yet what I didn't know is that behind the scenes, God was working and he was making streams in the wasteland. And he was making a way where there was no way. Sometimes we need God to carve out our path because if we carve it out, it will be filled with our own reliance. It'll be filled with our own conceptions. And we can start to mistake the path as our own when what the Lord does is he might take us into dryness only to show us that he is the one carving out the streams just when things look entirely impossible. And that's what he did. And that's what he's doing with me. And I know that's what he's doing with others. I just want to speak over you that if you have felt like this is a season where you don't understand and things have felt confusing and things have felt like, I don't know how to take the next step. I've talked to so many people that are in this place for a variety of ways. Sometimes we need to get to the end of ourselves so that he can truly step in, because his strength is made glory in our weakness. Like it comes through our weaker ways and our weaker times and our weaker parts. And we're not used to that. We're not used to living like that. We're not used to doing that. And we live in a very practical society where we're often taught to always look in the natural and to always be very, very rational about things. And I do believe there's a time and place for being rational. I'm not saying go, be irrational all the time, but God's economy doesn't work in our rational mind. What God does doesn't always add up. It doesn't always make sense. But he's given you a promise. He's given you a vision. He's given you a spark. He's given you something inside. Don't discount it. Don't run from it. Don't walk away from it. Don't feel like this isn't for me. This is just for other people, because he's got something for you. Allow him to be the one to make the way. Allow him the one to guide you on what to do. And the other thing I want to say is also look for ways, intentional ways, God's ways, to be able to sow when you're in famine, when you're in lack. Don't do it from your own strength, because it'll just burn you out, but lean into him and ask him, and he will show you these ways that you'll be able to sow, and it builds something inside. But I really want you to hear, because I think sometimes in our Christian communities, we've got two different camps here, right? We've got the cessationist camp, the Calvinist camp, that is very, everything that happens from God. There's no understanding of the enemy or the, Noahic covenant or any of that kind of stuff. And it's very rational. It's more black and white. And you're just kind of walking through, and whatever God does, he does. And it's all about the process. And then you've got the very strong charismatic side, which is about miracles and breakthroughs and suddenlies. And that's very powerful and it's very good. But you also can find, and I'm not saying everybody in the charismatic camp is of the prosperity gospel, because that's really not true. The charismatic camp, it's just charisma. It just means they believe in the gifts of the Spirit, which encompasses a lot of different believers. But you can find on the very staunch charismatic side a very strong prosperity type gospel, where there's this whole idea that God just wants you to be rich. And I think there's a big difference between being rich and being wealthy, meaning kingdom wealth, which is God's economy, where it's you're getting to shepherd what God is doing as he invites you and guides you as to where to put that. I think the challenge on both sides is there is not an understanding of what it really means to be prepared and promoted within the kingdom. I think the Bible speaks to it. I think anybody that you look at in the Bible who had a large impact, whether it was David or, Saul that later became Paul in the New Testament, there's a lot of people biblically who went through these longer seasons and had a lot of preparation. Saul in the New Testament, who was really going after Christians, right? He was persecuting God's people, even though he was a Pharisee, because he didn't believe in Jesus, and had that radical transformation with Jesus. When you read it in the Bible, it looks like he had the transformation, and then he was preaching to everybody, and he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. But there was 14 years between that moment and between when he really stepped in, right, to his ministry. I mean, even you look at Jesus, we have the birth, we have a little bit of his childhood, but then, then he stepped into ministry, right, at the age of 30. So the Bible often speaks to God's preparation, where I believe truly he weaves a lot together, right? There's just, he was turning off my faucet and he was guiding me. The enemy was also attacking me, coming at me with great resistance because of where God is leading me. But God is using all of that to develop me and sharpen me, as long as I'm staying close to him and not giving up. And I believe the problem that I see in both of those Christian camps is that neither one of them really speak to this. It's like in the Calvinist camp or the cessationist camp, and not all cessationists are Calvinists, but they do tend to go together, but not everybody. Uh, they are more looking at the natural, more black and white. They don't believe in the gifts. They're not necessarily miracle people. And so there's almost a passivity in journey. Not that they're passive in their belief in God. And I've learned a lot from people in that camp. So I'm not saying they're all bad. Please hear that. But I'm just saying, I think the downside is that there can be a lack of understanding of like, no, the enemy does attack us. And, God does work in our lives. And not every time something bad happens means we're being punished. And not everything that God does is meaning we're bad, right? It doesn't mean we always just pray harder and white knuckle more. And again, on that really charismatic side, not everything comes in miracles and breakthroughs, and not everything is prosperity. And I think the people that are really being brought into a place of true kingdom wealth are being taken in these seasons, because we don't want to end up like people who acquire all this wealth and they forfeit their very soul. I'm not saying that means that all of those people have gone to hell. I don't know. I don't know. That is the Lord's camp. But what I am saying is the legacy that they ended up leaving was a very poor legacy. It's really important in these seasons when we're pared down and we're leaning into God, that we really lean in so much more deeply to his voice. And sometimes it's a faint voice, because we are truly walking by faith and not by sight. Because when you get into the abundant season, you want to remember that with that abundance, with the blessing, with the promotion, as I've said, comes the warfare, comes the assignments. And you want to be in a place where you're so tuned in that you're not running through every open door, that you're not partnering with every single person that comes. That's what I've kind of learned in watching all the stuff that's been outed with a lot of the church lately. There's been a lot of pastors that have been outed with different abuses and different things, and things on the charismatic side. Seth and I did a few podcasts on that. But that's one of the things that I've learned, is not everything that looks good is from God. And so I truly believe that having a pared down season gets you ready for the voice. It gets you ready to know, who do you partner with and who do you not partner with? Who's in your life and who's not in your life? Not because everybody's bad, but because there are only certain people that the Lord may call you to walk with. And so I just think it's really important that not only do you listen to the voice and that you not give up, but understand that with great pare down comes great promotion, my friend. It's not as it seems. And so I just want to thank you for tuning in today. I want to thank you for listening. There's a prophetic dream that the Lord gave me just recently, and I'm going to be sharing it on a future podcast, because I think it's a super important message for the body and for where we're all going and what we all need in this season. But I just want to say that we need you. We need you. We need each other. We need to be stepping in where God is calling us to step in. We need to be walking in the places he's calling us to. There is so much more than what we can see in the here and now. And life means so much more than what we are experiencing in the natural. And so you, my friend, have greatness within you, because the Holy Spirit is within you and God is within you, and he is longing to be glorified in this season. And as we are seeing many people fall, and we are seeing a lot of apathy and just a lot of oppression in this time, you're called to something more, because you're called to impact in a way that nobody else is. And so it's so, so important that you stay the course, that you don't give up, that you lean in, that you take in the reframes, that you allow the strongholds to be broken, because he may be taking you into an experience that may feel like it is the end of everything. But often at the very, very end of ourselves is really and truly where his glory begins in greater measure. So I want to say thank you so much for listening. Please, please share this with someone who may be at the end of their rope and may not realize what God is doing in their life. So thank you so much. Sending you love. Bye until next time.